This is from good morning. I hope that this recording blesses you. If you're listening to it online, I really feel that the Lord gave me a word for the season that we're in. And this it's a relatively short teaching, but I think it's really powerful to guard our hearts in the season of what we're going through right now. And it's called Great Expectations versus Great Faith. And so I don't know, maybe this will minister to you. It ministered to me. The Lord ministered to my heart through it. And so I want to go, it's a New Testament verse, but it's the Old Testament story of Moses. And there's this tiny little fine point about the heart of Moses that we're going to be looking at. And so I want you to go to Acts chapter 7. And in Acts chapter 7, it's recounting the story of Moses. And the Lord has been having me look at the heart reactions of those that were his representatives on the earth. And in this, in chapter 7, what I think is very interesting is we know that he ends up high up in Pharaoh's household through the providence of God. But I want to start at verse 22 because I want you to see the human preparation of Moses. Says, so Moses was educated in all the wisdom and culture of the Egyptians. And I think this is very key. And he was mighty, and it says powerful in the Amplified Bible, in his speech and deeds. So I want you to see here that Moses was prepared for his role. Now, one thing that's very interesting, and this is a side note, a lot of people know about Moses and the burning bush and about how he said he had a problem with his speech. He started out being mighty in speech. And what happened is after his fall, after his rejection and his discipline and being out in the wilderness, his training and his normal gifting was affected. But God still used him in that. So I just think it's interesting that very few do we actually see that we think of Moses as having a hard time speaking. He didn't always. Okay, so the second thing, this is the thing that really, really hit me, is it says, and in his 40th year, okay, he's been being groomed for 40 years. Think about yourself. Like, you've had a lot of life experiences having married and children, and you're finally on maybe your career track. And then it says, it came into his heart. This is what the passion of his heart was. If you're talking about your life purpose, okay, it came into his heart to visit his kinsmen, the children of Israel. And then in the Amplified Bible, the connotation of these words in the original language says to help them and to care for them. So he had an expectation that he was going to be the deliverer. He had that expectation that he was in this position of power, and what is on the inside, that he was going to be an instrument to help and care for the Israelites. And it is that motivation, that is his expectation. So the thing is we have these expectations sometimes, and sometimes they are right in alignment with what God has. The motivation is right. But then it says in verse 24, and on seeing one of them being unjustly treated. Now, remember, he's got this passion. He was raised by his mother until he was turned over to Pharaoh's household. He obviously knows the history of the people. He sees them in slavery. And it says, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him. The thing is he was thinking that now was the time for deliverance. And that by his hand, he was going to save that oppressed person. And it says, and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian and slaying him. Now, this is where our action can get ahead of what God is wanting you to do. You have this passion, you take a human action, and sometimes it's in the midst of a stressful or a kind of like out of time, but it presents itself and it just happens, probably without too much thinking about it. And then it says, now here's the thing. This is the verse that tells you what his expectation was. I want you to look at this really closely. He expected his brethren to understand that God was granting deliverance by his hand. And in the Amplified Bible, it amplifies that out and says, taking it for granted that they would accept him, but they did not understand. Wow. Okay. Wow. When the Lord showed me that, he's like, Moses knew he had the identity to be the deliverer, but he got off course by a mistaken action. And then what happens to his great expectation? He has or experiences a great disappointment. And in that disappointment, he takes that passion and that identity as a deliverer, but he also takes, now here's the warning for today. He takes the rejection with him into the wilderness. And when the Lord calls Moses, all he is spewing back at the Lord is how he's not a good talker, about the people will never accept him. And his soul wound, his great lie that came in and stole his ability to speak because he believed the lie of the enemy. Okay? And so it can actually like take your great expectation and it can be covered underneath an atmosphere, under an atmosphere that is limited by the enemy. And then it says, then on the next day, he suddenly appeared to some who were quarreling and fighting among themselves, and he urged them and became reconciled, saying, listen to the words of Moses. Men, you are brethren. Why do you abuse and wrong one another? And then they criticize him, and Moses gets thrown out and disciplined, and he ends up with barely being able to stay alive and ends up on what seems like the far side of the earth. Okay? But what I want you to see here is in now we're going to go, because this part isn't in the New Testament, we're going to go to Exodus chapter 14. And I want you to see here how he goes through the calling. We'll get to Exodus chapter 14. He goes through the calling of the Lord and he's making all of these excuses, but it doesn't change his destiny. What is showing up is the lie and the emotional stronghold still in Moses's heart about the people rejected me. And it's affecting that actually he wasn't supposed to need Aaron to be the leader, but he ends up with that as his leader. So Exodus chapter 14, and now we're going to go to verse 13 and 14. Says, now Moses is, they're on the way out, they've done the plagues, they've been released, and now this is, I think it's very interesting. If you look at many of the times when they're talking to Pharaoh, it actually says, the movies all show Moses saying, let my people go. If you go look at the scriptures, most of the time Aaron is talking. Wow. It's actually not Moses. Moses has the authority. He has the staff. He tells Aaron what to say, but because of that lie and because of that heart wound, he ends up needing Moses to be by his side. Yeah. So, okay. But actually what I want you to see here is this is the restoration of Moses's leadership and Moses's voice. And this is when I believe that Moses comes back into his true destiny. And this is actually where he begins to show great faith. The expectation that it was going to be by his own hand was wrong. Great faith was that God was going to use him, but God was going to deliver the people. And so he goes from this great expectation. He was trained in the halls of men. He had too much confidence in himself. He makes this drastic mistake. And now, what do we see when they begin this journey out in the wilderness? They're free. And Moses says in verse 13, chapter 14, in verse 13, it says, Moses told the people. What I think is very interesting there, it's not Aaron's voice now. It's Moses. And I want you to see the difference between what was in his heart before as an expectation. And now we're going to see what is Moses's heart of great faith. And now this is what he says. It says, Moses told the people, verse 13, and they're criticizing Moses right before this. They're rejecting him, but now he's walking in faith and he's owning his position. Okay. And I want you to see this if you read the whole thing, but I want to get to verse 13 13. Moses told the people, here it is, fear not, stand firm. Fear not, stand firm. Firm, confident, undismayed, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians that you have seen today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace and remain at rest. He has now moved in to co-laboring with God. He is seated in heavenly places, and he is professing forth out of his own mouth the victory that is going to come. So I just want you to see how important it is that he has gone from believing that he was going to be delivered by his hand. And in this verse, he has now moved to the correct faith, profession, and co-laboring. The Lord is going to deliver us. Okay? And then we also see this as you move through Exodus. Now we're going to hop ahead. This is towards the end of their journey. He still has it right. In Exodus chapter 33. In Exodus 33, we see Moses going up in the presence of the Lord. And what is so beautiful about this is that Moses now has cooperating with the Lord to get the plan and the timing and the dependence. The plan, the timing, and the dependence. This is how you walk in great faith, where you don't assign it all to yourself and you get crushed. So the difference, and I want you to have expectations. We all want to have our imagination of what we see in the future, but it has to be from faith and not a man-made expectation. And so in this verse, what I think is so interesting is that he goes in and in verse 11, it says, the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And then in verse 12, he says to the Lord, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you said, I know you by name, and you have found favor in my sight. And then he said, he kind of repeats some of that in a greater way in verse 13. And then we get to the crux of it. Here's what great faith sounds like. The Lord said to Moses, my presence shall go with you, and I will give you rest. They're doing it together. But here's the thing, is that this is what great faith sounds like. Not great a trust in yourself, but great faith says, the Lord said to Moses, if your presence does not go with me. Now, there are some translations that translate that us, that it's the people. Okay, it has that connotation. Do not carry us up from here. The thing is, he did not want to go because he knew that the deliverance was going to come from the Lord. And they are going to go through, now this is the painful part. He's leading this people. They have a slave mentality and they're critical, and the same thing that he experienced. Now here's the thing that the Lord has been showing me. The same thing that knocked him out, as a young man and got thrown into the wilderness, he's still having to deal with the faults, the oppressive faults of man, of the people who are under him. Okay, but as he's experiencing that criticism this time, he's staying in lockstep with the Lord. Okay, and he is depending on the presence of the Lord. And what I think is very interesting, then he goes and he wants more of the Lord. Show me your glory. Show me your glory. And it goes on, and they make the covenant in chapter 14. They make that covenant. He makes this, and he gets the tablets again from the Lord. And it says in verse 10 is when it says, behold, I lay down afresh the terms of mutual agreement between me and Israel, a covenant. So the Abrahamic covenant is now continuing with Moses. And then it says, before all your people, I will do marvels, such you has not seen before. Then it says, and all the people among you, sorry, I'm at the end of verse 10, whom you shall see, it says, the work of the Lord. For it shall be a terrible thing, fearful and full of awe, that I will do. And notice it says, with you. Okay. So the whole thing is as this goes on, Moses comes down. He comes down in 34, skipping ahead to chapter 34 and verse 29. Moses came down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of testimony in his hand, and he did not know that the skin by his faith shone and sent forth beams by reason of his speaking with the Lord. And so the thing is what I'm trying to get you to see here is this is Moses walking in faith. Now, the frustrating thing is, and this is the frustrating thing of all the work that we do for the Lord, is that staying dependent, because we are going to continue to deal with stiff-necked people. And even at the end, before Moses gets to go into the promised land, he gets frustrated with the people He strikes the rock with his staff, and Moses doesn't get to go into the promised land. And what is it? The problem again is that the human frustration of dealing with humans, the human frustration of dealing. And in Galatians chapter 5 or 4 or 5, I believe it says, bear with each other's burdens and oppressive moral faults. So the thing is this is what we do as Christians. So that's just a side note, is that his entire life and every person who leads, every person who's out there dealing with people has to learn to deal with the oppressive moral faults. Otherwise, all those soul injuries take you out. Which is why these beautiful retreats, why these beautiful, like World Harvest just had Sozo training. I mean, why they've been having training at Chippewa is because we have to learn to stay in great faith and maintain that pure heart, because otherwise we get overcome with our own frustration at what other people choose, and the rejection and the criticism and the judgmental spirit begins to overtake you. So, but what I loved about today's encouraging for me is that he had this purpose like before he went to the wilderness. He had this desire to free his people. He had been groomed for this. And so, but it's obvious when you see the encounter, if you actually read chapter 7 and get this revelation of who he was, when like a lot of people, oh, he saw this and he killed the person, and and he gets put off, like, it's just so much more impactful when you see who he was. And then this encounter with God at the burning bush, even Moses's inside and how he viewed himself was impacted by the rejection, by the criticism, by the judgmental spirit. But he moved into fulfilling his calling and into great faith and stood in his position and owned it. And that's what I loved. I think it's so easy for that criticism, for that judgment to lodge in our heart. And then it becomes a permanent part, like when we talk, when I teach with the motorcycle helmet and we put on the bitterness and the resentment and the criticism and the rejection and all that, and it fills up our helmet, and we can't really release the presence of the Lord the way we should and walk in great faith instead of great wounding. Instead of having our expectations crushed, we're not viewing crushed expectations. So anyway, this is what the Lord has been, and you could also, the Lord just began, like, there's not enough time to teach it today, but the thing is if you look at every disciple, look at Peter, he had the expectations of Jesus, and I have verses on this, Jesus being the earthly king, and he had expectations that he was gonna be with Jesus till death do you part and never betray him. And he ends up betraying him. He ends up not being an earthly king. He ends up going through this exact cycle of great disappointment. And Peter ends up being one of the great men of faith. So he didn't let that become his atmosphere. And there's so many others. So it's been a beautiful thing. So I hope that it encourages you to keep staying the course during these difficult and trying times, and the people that we're going to be facing and working with. So,
wow.
Yeah. So
I want everyone to hear this.
Well, I know so God bless you, Jane, and anyone else who hears this online. And you can always join us on Facebook at our New Life for Today page. So have a great day.